Oh, 9 o'clock on your Monday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, returning from a week off. Jack Veltri on the other side of the glass. Good to see you, man.
It's been a long time, man, and welcome back. I know we texted you yesterday a little bit, and then we talked this morning, but Nashville, man, how was it? Was it a good time? I know you just told me about parking and how expensive that was, but besides, money aside, did you have a good time? Do you feel refreshed coming back here?
I do. It was nice. We actually started off the week. We went to the Jelly Roll and Post Malone concert in Atlanta.
Awesome.
At Mercedes-Benz Stadium. First time I'd actually ever been inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium, by the way.
Wow.
Very cool. A lot of bells and whistles. The Georgia Dome holds a very special place in my heart, and I will never love a stadium more than that. But Mercedes-Benz Stadium, pretty neat.
Yeah, so does that mean we're going to Bills Falcons Monday Night Football in October?
Hey, if you want to get the tickets, I'm all for it.
Dude, I'm down. So that would be fun.
I will say park in the Silver Deck because that has a direct bridge to the stadium where you don't have to go outside. And it was raining on Sunday, so that was kind of nice too. So I learned a few tricks around there. Very, very cool place. Concession price is obviously amazing if you didn't already know about that. And good show, late show. We ran into like 11:30 that night, so we got our money's worth. That's for sure.
So let me ask. So I have seen Post Malone here in Columbia, but that was before he
got huge.
Yeah. Well, no. He was already big.
Okay.
I forget what album it was. It was I think it was Hollywood's Bleeding is what he announced, or what he had already just recorded. But my question is, he has the country album out now, F1.
Yep.
How was that incorporated into, how did the show go in terms of that?
Yeah, so he played a little bit of everything, and Jelly Roll was his opening act, essentially. So Jelly Roll played his set, and then they switched the stage over, and Post Malone was the headliner, and the majority of the show was the country album, but he intermixed everything. He played, Congratulations. He played a lot of stuff from those earlier albums. I'd say it was probably about a 60-40 split, and he would alternate, right? So he'd play a country song, he'd play an older song, play a country song, play an older song. So, and my wife, she's a big Post Malone fan, bigger of a fan than I am, and I was like, well, it is his first country album, so I think a lot of people go to the show maybe not being as familiar with his country work, so he does intermix the other stuff and plays kind of the familiar hits, because she's like, I didn't expect him to play all these songs from his earlier time in his career and stuff like that. But if you're a Post Malone fan from the beginning, I think you heard everything that you wanted to hear.
He is a good person to go see in concert, live. He is excellent, but with the country, man, I'm jealous.
Yeah.
That does sound pretty good.
It was a lot of fun. I think he smoked like 12 cigarettes over the course of his 2-hour set, essentially.
And probably had his red Solo cup in hand the entire time.
The funny thing is he has a guy that comes out to the stage after every third song to hand him another Solo cup. And so his stage juts out into the crowd, kind of comes out into like a T-shape. And as the show's going on, he's strategically placing Solo cups everywhere. So when he needs a drink, there's one within 10 feet of him, essentially.
Man, he's the man. He's awesome to see in concert, but glad you had a good time, man. And
that was fun.
Glad to have you back.
Yeah, then went to Nashville. That was expensive, but very fun. As I was just telling Bill a moment ago, there's a trillion bars downtown.
Oh,
for anybody that's never been there. So we didn't hit all of them. I will say the last thing we hit up the night before we left was it's Pete's Dueling Piano Bar.
I've heard the piano bar, yes.
10 out of 10. Phenomenal time. They take nothing but requests. And again, it's two people dueling on pianos, going back and forth.
That is awesome.
If I have to recommend one bar in downtown Nashville, that's the one.
Yeah, no, Nashville, Broadway, very good time if you've never been. But I feel like most people have probably been at this point that are listening. But yeah, it's good, man. It's awesome. And once again, really glad to have you back. And we've got a lot to talk about, huh?
Oh, yeah, we do. Well, we'll kick things off as we always do at 9 o'clock with our Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up.
Time to get hyped.
Here's your 9 a.m. Sandstorm.
Sponsored by George Sink Injury Lawyers. Just call all nines.
you're gone for a week and they start moving things around. I had to find the sounder for the Sandstorm Pick Me Up because it was a different place. But it is time for the 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick Me Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or at work, call George Sink now at 803-ALL-9. So I was gone last week, but I did keep an eye on what was happening with Gamecock sports. We'll obviously talk about baseball and the negatives coming up in a minute. But we got to start with positives. You spent the majority of your weekend out at Beckham Field for what was a very fun regional for South Carolina as they're able to advance through to a super for the first time since 2018, taking down Elon and then North Florida twice over the course of the weekend.
Very good weekend for this program. Just a great environment, first off. I think that's where we need to start. I mean, look, obviously, baseball this weekend, we'll get into it a bit. The crowds were not great there. Very much LSU pro, and that's something to talk about here in a bit. But my point is, because of that, you had softball packed out every single game, and it was really nice to see I think Gamecock fans, coming up to me and talking about, how the baseball crowd is so different from this. It's probably refreshing for them to be able to be a part of a lively environment and see a team on the field that's really, really good. I mean, South Carolina softball is no slouch to get into a super regional here, and they swept through the weekend, obviously beating Elon in game 1 and then shutting out North Florida in games 2 and 3 over the weekend to go 3-0. But the big thing I take away from this weekend, man, 2-out hitting was so important over these 3 games. You had 12 of your 16 runs come with 2 outs. All 8 that you scored yesterday, 2 in the 4th inning and 6 in the 5th to win in run rule fashion, all came with 2 outs, and it led to Abigail Knight after the game, 6th-year outfielder for the Gamecocks, labeling this team as the 2-out bandits, which I think is very fitting considering just how well they were hitting in those spots.
Let's hear a little bit from Coach Chastain Woodard about that 2-out hitting after the regional finale yesterday.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a couple things. It's funny you mentioned the 2 outs because Abby Knight was in the dugout calling us the 2-out bandits the whole game. So she tagged us the 2-out bandits. But I think today really reminded me of how we've played earlier in the year. I mean, I was thinking back to some of our wins in February and March early on. Like it took us in a bat or two, like that 3rd time through is really when we came through a lot of times. And then all of a sudden, we walk it off early. So we've done that a lot. And I felt like today really felt like, early in the year, February and March. And Abby's right when she talks about contagious. Like everything you do is contagious, if it's good or bad. We talk a lot about that internally. So, just really relying on each other, playing past the bat, that's what they call it. Just continuing to just flood the next person with a lot of good energy at bat to at bat. And that's how you start stringing stuff together. And you look up and all of a sudden you scored 8 runs with 2 outs, the 2-out bandits. So that's who we were.
Like you said, all 8 of those runs yesterday coming with 2 outs and 12 over the course of 3 games that South Carolina played this weekend. And I think you do have to give a lot of credit to North Florida, a team that's not really used to being in this position. I believe, was this their first regional they'd ever been a part of?
I believe so. And they're a good team, man.
They are a good team. And Allison Benning, who pitched both games against South Carolina, did a really good job the first time through the order, keeping the Gamecocks in check. They had 1 hit through 4 innings in the first game they played on Saturday, and then held South Carolina scoreless for the first 3 innings yesterday, and hitless as well until South Carolina finally started scoring in the 4th and 5th. Innings there. So they were challenged for sure, but eventually the bats ended up working up for South Carolina, and they were able to pull away and shut them out in both games.
Yeah, let me just say, Allison Benning is a very, very, very talented player. She, I think, threw 315 pitches this weekend, man. That's in 3 starts. So
I have a strong feeling she's going to be on a higher level team next year.
Yeah, and the players from North Florida were joking about, that they're going to have to go play like beer league softball or something, or slow pitch softball now. So, I think Benning is, she was easily the most talented player in this regional, and you knew South Carolina was going to have to face her at some point, and wondering yesterday what North Florida's strategy would have been with the 2 games potentially, and it made sense that they started her in game 1, just knowing you had to win. And look, as much as it is, giving up a few runs and stuff and losing 8-0, their offense just did not come through. And a lot of the credit also needs to be given to the pitching. I mean, Sam Gress was phenomenal yesterday, over 4 innings, giving up 3 hits. She pitched, I believe, 8 2/3 scoreless innings this weekend. Jory Hurd, who's been an absolute weapon out of the bullpen, came in, pitched 1 hitless inning yesterday, retiring all 3 batters she faced. I'll have to go back and look at the numbers, but I believe she only gave up a 1 hit this weekend. So 5 1/3 innings on Friday. And then yesterday, or 2 days ago, can't remember off the top of my head, but she finished off after Gress, and then Sunday 1 inning. So very good weekend for the pitching staff, and overall just a very good weekend in general for the Gamecocks on the softball diamond.
And Sam Gress, obviously the ace of the staff. One thing that really impressed me about her, because she only pitched the 2 games against North Florida, is being able to get herself out of jams, and the defense helped out a lot with that. She got into a bases-loaded situation in the first inning of Saturday's game, got out of that. Had 2 on with 1 out in the 3rd inning of that game, got out of that. Got in a 2-out jam in the 3rd inning yesterday, was able to get out of that. So, and again, it's her pitching as well as the good defense behind her, some key line drive catches, and other plays out in the field being made. So, again, a total team effort, which is why South Carolina's in the position that they're in right now, going to a super and hosting UCLA.
Yeah, and it's going to be a tough UCLA team coming in. I don't know if you saw the scores from them, but my goodness, they run ruled UC Santa Barbara twice, and I forget who the other team in their regional was, but they swept through it. They just dominated, man, and so it's going to be tough. I mean, they're coming over, they're making the cross country trip here. That series is on Friday, 1 p.m. ESPN2, and then same time on Saturday. But yeah, man, it's going to be tough, but this is what you play for, a chance to go to Oklahoma City, 2 wins away.
And not to say that you're satisfied with where you're at as of right now, but they've already exceeded expectations in a lot of people's mind, right? Because whenever you make a coaching change, and good, Bev Smith had this program in a good place, but not a great place. And you expect, okay, when you change coaches, when you have a roster turnover, there might be a little bit of a step back. But the fact that they hosted a regional as a top 8 national seed and are now hosting a super, I feel like everything past this is gravy, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. Like, everything is icing on the cake and cherry on top and so much more right now. And look, whatever happens this upcoming weekend does not destroy what has already been built this season. Like, it's been a great year. This is just the beginning for this program, it seems like. And, you know, the players love playing for Ashley, it seems, and just the vibes are good right now. I think this is what happens when you decide, okay, you know, we're not satisfied with where we were in softball under Bev Smith. We can do better, invest more, and it's worked out tremendously, and it's been awesome to see.
Well, both Diamond Sports had the same conversation last offseason. We're good, but we need to be better. Softball's obviously taken that step forward. Baseball, on the other hand, has not. And unfortunately, they made history this past weekend with their series against LSU, which we'll dive into. Let's listen to Paul Maneri coming up next as the Extra Point rolls along. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry on your Monday here on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point. Tirehead, Jack Beltray along with you here on your Monday on the Game. I'm sure when you guys were in here on Friday, you got to talk about what was a fun Thursday night out at Founders Park, South Carolina, pulling off the upset, crazy walk-off, wild pitch ending to take down number one LSU 6-5. Reality kind of set in for the rest of the weekend, though, with South Carolina losing games 2 and 3 to wrap up what is quite literally the worst SEC series record for this program ever. 6-24.
I mean, much like with softball and winning all these games and stuff, the losing is just the cherry on top to a god-awful baseball season. I mean, look, this has been just a nightmare season, and me personally, I'm kind of glad it's coming to an end because it's hard to watch, man. It really is. And I go back to that point I made in the last segment about the crowd turnout this weekend. And, you know, I was there for game 1, but just watching on TV and then seeing the clips online and stuff for games 2 and 3, and you just hear the LSU chants deafening in there. If I were blind and I heard that clip, I'd be like, oh, like that's at the box, right? It's LSU's home baseball stadium. No, that was Founders Park, and I don't blame the fan base for not coming. I don't at all, but it just shows where things are at this year, and this is a baseball program that has a lot of work to do this summer.
And that's the ultimate insult because, again, South Carolina's fan base takes baseball so seriously. And even in years where, you know, the program maybe wasn't the best, you still had people showing up and supporting the program. And I, again, you've been covering this program longer than I have. I can't remember too many instances of other fan bases truly coming in and taking over Founders Park like that. And like you said, the fact that you're having a softball regional happening at the same time maybe contributed a little bit, but it's embarrassing because, like you said, if you didn't know any better, you're like, well, that sounds like a LSU home game as opposed to a South Carolina when those kind of things should never happen. But again, kind of shows you where this program is as of right now. And when you look at what softball is doing, like I said, both, and Ray Tanner was obviously the AD at this point a year ago, looked at both Diamond Sports and said, okay, they're good. They were making regionals, but they weren't really doing anything past that. We need to bring in a coach on both of these teams to be able to take them to the next level. Softball has obviously done that, and they have an opportunity, if they win 2 more games this weekend, to go to Oklahoma City for the first time in almost 30 years. And baseball, on the other hand, has now just had its worst season in the history of SEC play, which dates back to the early 90s. Like, two polar opposites on how these first years have gone.
And the one common thing I continue to see fans bring up is the fact that anytime softball does remotely well, you see, and in this season for sure, you see the comments online about, hey, Coach Maneri, this is how you win, this is how you do it, and all this stuff. Now, to be fair, I mean, softball, I think the softball job, I think I've said it before, the softball job I think is tougher just because you're playing in a very loaded conference, much like the SEC.
Which got even tougher this year, by the way.
Yeah, with the additions of just the reigning national champions and winners of 4 straight Women's College World Series with the OU, and then Texas is very good as well.
Played for the national championship last year.
So, again, at South Carolina, softball, before making the tournament the last 2 years, this program was awful. I mean, they were winning like 3-4 SEC games, and that was before OU and Texas joined. So just imagine how much worse it could have been back then. So the job was tough. Ashley has turned the program around marvelously in 1 year, and you have the counter argument made like baseball stinks, softball's great. They're polar opposites right now in terms of where things are at, and you have a really tough job to do here with baseball, figuring this thing out, because you have an aging head coach who's 67 right now. He's going to be 68 next year, and I don't know how you convince players to come play for you next year. It's going to be tough.
Coach Maneri talked on Saturday after the Game 3 loss about, in hindsight, what could have potentially made them better in SEC play this season.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what the first part of that question had to do with the last part of the question, but, listen, whenever there's a transition, there's a reason there's a transition. So, you do the best you can with the players that you have, and you try to add to it with a little bit like we did. And we did the best we could. I thought we would be more competitive in the conference. I didn't think we had a national championship caliber team put together, but we just some days got overpowered by the other team. Their pitching was just too good for our hitters, or their hitters were too good for our pitching, and consequently we end up with the record that we did. I'm not sure what I could have done differently. We worked really hard last summer when we first got the job to add a few pieces, and some guys that we added did some good stuff for us, and some other guys that we added maybe didn't perform at the level we might have thought they would have. But the league's tough. It's unforgiving, and we've already rolled up our sleeves and are working hard at recruiting for next year to try to make our team as best as we can and better than it was this year. But we still have the SEC tournament, so I don't want to get into all that too much. We got a big game on Tuesday, and we'll get ready for that.
We'll talk about Hoover here in a moment. Jack, you do have to make the long trek out there for what might end up being a very, very short stay. Mainieri, did also talk about in that presser on Saturday, having to retain the talent that they have. Young guys like KJ Scobie and Bill Hollins that obviously show a lot of promise, and potential, as well as some of the guys like Jace Wooded that have obviously done a really good job in year one, out of the transfer portal. But in terms of building and adding what you need next season, when you're coming off a historically bad year, your program's a lot harder to sell. Like last year when he was recruiting these guys to come in here, it's like, hey, this is the South Carolina program that historically has been good. These past couple years, they've been good but not great, and we're bringing in a former national championship winning head coach to take it to the next level. Well, now you're saying, okay, here is a program that was good, took a massive step back with a head coach that seems to be over his head a little bit and has admitted to that in his first year back in the SEC. Do I want to go play for that guy? If I have 1 year left of eligibility and I'm trying to make my case for going pro or whatever it may be, or I just want to play in a national championship caliber team, do I want to come to South Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, so many guys this season have regressed, and their draft stock is wiped out. I mean, they're going to have to just I don't even know how they build themselves back up, because what if guys are out of college eligibility, right? What about a guy like Matthew Becker, or what does a guy like Roman Kimball do that had draft stock last year, went to the draft combine and impressed scouts, and then he comes back and this thing has been train wrecked. I mean, he's got to basically start from scratch here after the season ends. But I have so many issues with what Paul said yesterday or 2 days ago in his press conference. I mean, just the fact that he says, I'm not sure what I could have done differently. What do you mean? What do you mean you don't know what you could have done differently?
Well, that's not reassurance for fans either. It's like, well, if you don't know, what makes us think you're going to figure it out in the offseason?
Yeah, and then I also look, did anyone expect a national championship this year? Absolutely not. But to go out there and say that you don't think you had a winning roster basically is a problem. And then you also admit the fact that, there are teams with better players out there than South Carolina. Imagine how a player feels having to hear that. And, it's just – and then the whole Petrie situation, which I think was personally just blown out of proportion too, with the whole, that he hasn't talked to Petrie at all this weekend. That was definitely not the case reading what he had to say there. But
yeah, I think that people – and look, when things are going bad, you obviously want to pile on and stuff like that. But I think it was more of a situation as he hadn't talked to him about of his availability for the tournament, not just like, hey, I've not spoken a word to Ethan Petrie at all.
Like, he's been in the dugout all weekend and stuff. And I think he just meant that in the sense that, he's probably asked him every single day how he's feeling and stuff. He just probably does not want to continue to harp on it when the guy's probably already down about him, just not being out there.
And again, we've talked about this. If you're Ethan Petrie, even if you were healthy for tomorrow, what's the value in coming back?
He's not healthy. And dude, let's just be real. Well, this team is just about done. I mean, they're going to go into tomorrow against Florida, a very good Florida team
that outscored them 39-8 a couple weeks ago here.
I think they're checked out. I think they're ready. They're probably ready to pack up the season just like everyone else is. And, we'll see. Going out to Hoover tomorrow morning, that should be fun, I'm sure, for one game. But yeah, I mean, expect to see me back probably Maybe not Wednesday, but definitely Thursday.
They do play tomorrow against Florida. First pitch at 5:30. We'll have all that for you here on 107.5 The Game, and if they do win, they'll continue on. But I don't think we're placing a lot of high hopes on that.
No, again, just so many problems this season, and again, some of the things Mary said, real issues there.
How do you feel about noon kickoffs?
From work purposes, good. As a fan, awful.
Well, the state of Ohio hates noon kickoffs, and their state legislator is trying to enact some laws to prevent that from happening. We'll dive into that coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Feltry along with you on your Monday here on The Game.
When it comes to HVAC replacements, AAA Heating and Air has your back. They offer guaranteed financing, 12 months with no payments or interest, and a 15-year warranty on parts and labor. So if you need a new system, they're the best in the Midlands. They are the ones you need to go to. But what if you don't need a replacement? What if you need just a repair? I got good news for you. AAA Heating and Air has you covered there, too. They offer up to 12-month payment plans on repairs with no credit check for homeowners who need repairs. So all you need is just a valid bank account, and they'll handle the rest. That's it. So whether you need a replacement or a repair, AAA Heating and Air has unbeatable options. Give them a call today and get your comfort back.
Welcome back in. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head, Jack Belcher with you on your Monday. Appreciate everybody checking us out on the Game TV, powered by Integrated Media and sponsored by our friends over at Shepherd's Glass. I think it goes without saying the biggest enemy of the Ohio State Buckeyes is the Michigan Wolverines, a team that has gotten the better of them for the last 4 seasons. I think the second biggest rival to the Buckeyes might be noon kick, specifically Big Noon Saturday. Have you been following the saga of Ohio State versus Big Noon kickoff here as of late?
I have to some extent here, and yeah, look, Ohio is getting involved. The state of Ohio is getting involved in, not having noon kickoffs. And look, I understand it. I do. Like, I do not like. What's worse than a noon kickoff? An 11 a.m. kickoff. When you're in the Central Time Zone, or gosh, honestly, West Coast. There are some cases where you have to play at like 9:30 in the morning. I mean, that's not fun for fans or players or anyone. But you can't really get out of it as for Ohio State because you have the contract with Big Town Fox.
And look, every program is going to have a noon kick at some point during the year, whether you're playing an FCS team or just playing a lower-end team in your conference that doesn't generate a lot of buzz. Everybody kind of gets used to it. Now, Carolina played a huge game against LSU at noon last year, so those kind of things do happen. But every fan base strives to have a home night game, right? Because you have an all day to tailgate, all day to get the buzz and atmosphere, the lights come on, all that kind of stuff just creates the atmosphere that we love so much about college football that unfortunately gets taken away in a lot of ways when you have a noon kickoff like Ohio State tends to find themselves in, because again, they're the biggest brand in the Big Ten and in all of college football. Well, Ohio State Representative Tex Fisher has introduced a potential bill to prevent noon kickoffs from happening. The proposal would prevent an Ohio State game from starting before 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time whenever another state university is involved or both teams are ranked in the top 10. The Michigan game is the exception. The penalty to this would be $10 million fine against the host team's conference or the television network, depending on who scheduled the game. Now, this is not going to end up passing. It's fun to talk about, but it's not going to end up getting too much traction. But this shows you how mad the people of Ohio are against noon kickoffs. But at the same time, I completely understand why Fox does what they do. And listen, for a long time, the noon time slot was not taken seriously in college football. Those were the games that didn't really matter a whole lot, usually were blowouts, taking on FCS teams or whatever it may be. And Fox looked around and said, hey, wait a minute, nobody's putting big games in this window. What if we attend almost every single week? It also doesn't help that Oregon, your now other biggest brand in the conference, can't play home games at noon because it'd be a 9 a.m. local kick.
So I'm going back to last year's schedule. They had, I think, 7 of their 12 games in the regular season were at noon. I mean, it's just crazy to think about. Like, for perspective.
Including, like, the last 6 in a row.
Yeah. I mean, in the month of September and going into October, like midway before their second bye week, I mean, they had basically 3:30 or 7:30 kicks, and they randomly played Marshall at noon on Fox. So it's like, look, Ohio State's the big brand. It doesn't matter who they're playing. If there's not great games during a specific week, more likely than not, you're going to see Ohio State at noon on Fox. And from a TV standpoint, it makes sense. Like for a viewer watching at home or tailgating or whatever for a later game, and you want to watch something, but there's not a lot of great games on, oh, look, Ohio State's on Fox. It makes sense. But from the Ohio State fan perspective, or anyone that is kind of involved in this, that gets the short end of the stick having to play early, I can understand why they're frustrated.
Yeah, it sucks. And it goes back to something that we've known for a while, but I think continues to gain more and more steam in terms of a conversation point. The powers that be in college football do not care about fans, right? They care about the money that the fans generate for them. They care about the viewership and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of the actual fan experience, they could care less. I mean, look at all that's changed in college football in the past handful of years. Look at what we're about to do with the college football playoff changing again, all the conference realignment. At no point in that process has anybody stopped and said, hey, wait a minute, how's this going to affect the way fans feel about the game of college football? As long as we keep watching, and they know we're going to, they could care less that our stadium atmospheres aren't going to be the same, or that they're taking away night games and all this kind of stuff, because they know they've got us hook, line, and sinker.
It's all about money at the end of the day. And look, it's a business. I think, I get what they're doing, but it's also like not having the consumer in mind. It's not right, but it's what they're doing. They see the numbers for viewership and stuff, and they're like, okay, if people are actually watching as much as they are at big noon on Fox, we're going to continue to churn it out. And they see it as no problem, while the fans are obviously not happy about it, but there's something they can really do about it.
And Ohio State, again, is legitimately one of the, if not the biggest brands in all of college football. It doesn't matter what time you play an Ohio State game, whether it be noon, 7 o'clock, or 5 in the morning, people are going to watch it, because Ohio State is always a relevant team in the national championship landscape, and they routinely have some of the best players. Jeremiah Smith legitimately might be the best player in college football right now that people want to tune in and see. So it's, and look, Penn State's good, Oregon's good, plenty of other good, capable teams in the Big Ten, but Ohio State is its own different kind of animal in just how good they are and the brand that they are that makes them appointment television no matter who they're playing.
Yeah, I mean, it just, I get it, it's, it definitely is, it is what it is. I mean, look, there's nothing no one can really do about it at this point. And look, as long as people continue to watch, which they will, I mean, we are sickos for football. And so nothing's going to change unless, viewership were to take a drastic hit. But I don't see that being the case at all anytime soon.
I want to continue this conversation on the other side, because I do think, and I know this makes people's skin crawl, but college football could learn something from the NFL with how they do their TV deals, where these kind of things wouldn't happen anymore, which I'll get into coming up next. It is the Extra Point, Tyler Head and Jack Belcher on your Monday on The Game. Welcome back in, Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher along with you here on your Monday, talking about kickoff times. I wasn't here last week, but we did learn what I assumed was going to be the case. South Carolina kicking off at 3 o'clock for their game one, or first game of the season against Virginia Tech on that Sunday. Standalone game, I thought it'd be 3:30, but 3 o'clock, kind of no difference there. Obviously, I wasn't here last week, but I feel like that's been met pretty positively by everybody. Anybody have any problem with that from anything maybe I didn't see?
No, I didn't see any freakouts online or anything like that. So, I think it's a good time, honestly. It's that happy medium between playing a night game, which I know people do prefer, versus, oh, hey, we got to play at noon. Like, I think it works out very well. And it's a standalone game on a Sunday. And yes, you have Notre Dame, Miami later that night. But it's, you're the only team going on in the 3:30 window, and there's no NFL going on, until the next week. So it's gonna be the show for South Carolina, and they're gonna have a huge opportunity to kickstart the season with a potential win.
Looking forward to that against Virginia Tech coming up in week number 1 in Atlanta. Continuing this conversation, though, going back to Ohio State and their disdain for noon kickoffs to the point that their state government is attempting to get involved. As much as we love college football and its uniqueness from the NFL, there are a few areas where I feel like college football could really look at the NFL and say, that would probably be a better idea. And a uniform TV contract, me, is probably towards the top of the list because, and conferences would never go for this, because the SEC and the Big Ten make as much money as they do because of their TV deals with ESPN, with Fox, with CBS, and all those, NBC now with the Big Ten as well, and all that kind of stuff. But the fact that the NFL has one TV contract across multiple partners, where the Chiefs don't play at 4:25 every single week or 8:20 on Sunday night, like it's a mix and match. You get different teams in different windows that gives different exposure to everybody over the course of an NFL weekend and the course of an NFL season, to we're not running into playing at the same time every single week and angering one specific fan base. And in a perfect world of college football, I think that would exist as well. But I think we're so far down the road, especially again with the disparity between what the Big Ten and the SEC make on their TV deals and what the ACC and the Big 12 make, that I don't ever think, until we just have one unit of college football, whether we ever get there or not, I don't think we're ever going to see that kind of thing happen in this sport.
No, because we're talking about TV, stations and companies and stuff like ABC, Fox, ESPN, or CBS. We have NBC, all the ones you just labeled out there. They're their own entity. So they're trying to get deals with college football to broadcast their games. And so that has nothing to do with college football necessarily. That's more so the TV stations working with, the bigger brand to try to figure out what times work best and stuff. But, and all these contracts are going to be different too. They end at different years. They go for different rates. It's tough to get everyone on the same page of like, hey, let's do it like the NFL. I just don't think that's ever really going to happen. I think we're going to be in this continuous cycle of these teams play at noon, these teams play at 3:30 on CBS, and you'll get the occasional mixing and matching. It's not like every weekend. Like, we go back to the Ohio State schedule, but while they did play a lot of noon games, they also did have some night games, some 3:30 games. So they are getting a lot of different pieces of the pie, I would say.
But the biggest games are happening at noon.
Yes. So
that's the problem people have.
You're getting like 3/4 of the slice of the pie is noon kicks, and the other 25%, it's the sprinkled in 3:30 and 7:30 kicks.
What's the perfect kickoff time for you?
Me,
take your reporter hat off, just as a fan.
Just as a fan, because I would say easily from a work standpoint, give me a noon kick, because I don't get out of there for a night game. There have been times where I get out of there at 3 in the morning. Yep. I don't like that. But, for me as a fan, I do like a night game. I do. But I think a 3:30 kick, a nice autumn afternoon, there's a chill in the air a little bit, but it's sunny. I do like a 3:30 kick.
I love the 3:30 kick, and I think it meant a little bit more with CBS. Now, the best game of the week, can be at 7 or 7:30 on ESPN or ABC or whatever, because they have exclusive rights to the SEC. But playing that 3:30 game on CBS obviously meant you were the game of the week in the SEC, and it was just prime, right in the middle of the day. Like you said, especially my favorite time for the 3:30 kick is after the time change.
Yes.
Right? In late October, early November, whenever it is, where you essentially play one half in the daylight and one half at night. And just that transition as the sun's going down,
it's awesome.
you know, the lights are gleaming off the helmets. It's one of my favorite aesthetics in all of sports.
Yes, absolutely. And, night games are great and all, but the way I look at it is, and I look at this the same way as a reporter, you get your nights to watch the games on TV that are the 8 o'clock games, and you get the Pac-12 after dark, technically the West Coast games.
Yeah, West Coast after dark.
Yes, West Coast. So they don't start till 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. So I like it from that standpoint. But noon's not bad, but 3:30 is probably the best.
Noon is not bad in small doses. Now, if South Carolina played 7 straight noon games, we'd have a problem with it. But 1 or 2 here over the course of the season, nobody's going to have an issue with that. And it does open up the rest of the day for you, which is the one advantage to it.
Absolutely.
But Ohio State fans, I feel for you. 6 straight nooners, 7 out of 12 games, that sucks.
Yeah, they have to take the biggest blow of any team in the Big Ten. So,
well, unfortunately, it's not going to change anytime soon, I don't think.
No, I don't think so either.
Jack, we'll talk to you on the road to Hoover tomorrow.
Yeah, sounds good, man.
That'll do it for hour number 1 of the Extra Point. Sam Spear jumps in with me for hour number 2, coming up next here in the game. Well, Tyler Head here for our friends over at Twin Peaks. The month of May is a busy one in the sports world, and tomorrow in the NBA, the conference finals are tipping off, and you can catch all that action at Twin Peaks with wall-to-wall scenic views and a round of 29-degree draft beers with your crew as you see who's going to make it through the East and the West to play in the finals coming up here in just a couple of weeks. This is also a very, very busy weekend as well from a sports standpoint. You have baseball tournaments. You have the Indy 500 coming up on Sunday. And, of course, one place to catch all that amazing action is with our friends at Twin Peaks right down the street from us here in the Vista. Get some delicious food, get some of those 29-degree draft beers, and just hang out and have a good time. All with our friends at Twin Peaks right here in Columbia. Welcome back in. Hour number 2, Extra Point. Tyler Ed, Sam Shapiro hopping in here with me as he does each and every Monday. Well, not last Monday. I was not here, but hopefully, I don't even know who you were with last Monday. Hopefully, y'all had a good time.
Yeah, me and Terry were just hanging out last Monday. We had a pretty good time. Talking some NBA playoffs. We're hoping the LSU series was going to go a little more optimistically. They did get one.
Yeah, Thursday was fun. Wild walk-off, wild pitch, something you don't see a whole lot. But Jack and I talked about in the last hour, that quickly went away with the last 2 games of the series, unfortunately, and wrapped up what is a historically terrible year for South Carolina baseball in SEC play at 6-24.
But you know what? They did get one, and a lot of people were not thinking they were even going to get one. And considering they didn't necessarily, it was at least close in that game, and they kind of honestly snuck out of that one with a win. It was a nice surprise. It was a good way, I think, I wouldn't say it was a bow on top of a bad season, but it was definitely better than getting completely washed out.
Yeah, I mean, you could have gotten swept. It could have gotten swept. It would have been obviously worse if you did. But I think, that's where a lot of people coming away from the weekend are talking about, saying, hey, for South Carolina, just taking one game against the number 1 team in the country shouldn't be good enough. Like, you should have the standard of being competitive enough to win the series. And yeah, Thursday night was great. That was a fun game, fun to watch, and you could feel good about it in the moment. And then to just kind of not show up the rest of the weekend and get outscored, 15-4 over the course of the final 18 innings. Like, yeah, you used up everything you had on Thursday night, and again, it's kind of a microcosm for what's been a dull and disappointing season.
Well, at least you're not giving up the 15 runs in one game this time.
Well, that's true. The unfortunate part is tomorrow you do take on a team that beat you 22-3 a couple weeks ago that could very likely end your season, because your only hope is winning essentially 5 games in 5 days out in Hoover. And look, crazy things can happen in baseball. I don't think it's going to get that crazy. Could you win a game theoretically? Sure, because anybody can win any baseball game on any day depending on circumstances. But going on some miracle run, I'm not expecting that to happen. I don't think anybody is. And our guy Jack, who just left, is heading out to Hoover later on today, and I don't think he's going to have to stay very long.
Well, he'll have a nice little trip to Alabama at least. But is Petrie going to be in this game? Do we know?
No, probably not. In fact, we can start off with that. Coach Maneri on Saturday after losing game number 3 was kind of asked about the update on Ethan Petrie, if there's any chance we could see him one final time for South Carolina.
I haven't talked to him about it, but I'd be doubtful about that. He wasn't even on the active roster for this weekend, so that tells you how sore his shoulder was. So I haven't talked to him in the last day or so about it. You hate to just keep saying, hey, how's your shoulder feeling? How's your shoulder feeling? It's not like, like that it's going to be a miracle. So I'm doubtful that he would be ready to go.
And when he got hurt a couple weeks back, we knew kind of the earliest chance for him to return would likely be the SEC tournament. And I don't think he's close to 100% anyway, but even if he was, I don't know what the benefit of him playing is, quite frankly. And yeah, you can be a team guy, want to help his teammates out, all those kind of things, but I think you'd be running a risk, because again, he's going to get drafted here coming up in a little over a month's time, with the MLB draft. So he would be risking further injuring himself, which could hinder his draft stock at the end of the day. And I don't think it's worth doing that. Again, I don't think he's close to 100% anyway. But even if he was, if I'm Ethan Petrie, why would I take the risk for a team that, quite frankly, is not playing for anything?
You took the words right out of my mouth, Tyler. I mean, last week they were debating if he wanted to kind of finish out the regular season with them, and I heard Maneri kind of saying that he, they had kind of been talking, and he sounded like he was kind of up for the task, but I think that shortly kind of changed course a little bit. And like you said, he's getting drafted in a couple weeks, and I'm sure, he probably wants to be out there with his guys, just maybe one last time as he's kind of saying farewell. But when you got the MLB at your doorstep, I mean, if I'm his teammate, I'm telling him, dude, forget about me. Go do your thing. Like,
yeah.
So
and it sucks because he's here for 3 years, and year number 1 they did make it to a super regional, and he exploded on the scene there. Year 2, they take a step back and they only make a regional and get bounced in Raleigh last year. And then this year, again, he missed the back half of conference play, but they ended up having the worst year, in program history in terms of, their record in the SEC. So it's unfortunate that what could have been regarded as one of the best players this program's ever seen, A, we didn't get to see, finish out his time here, but B, ends up on a team that just ends up underwhelming as a whole. And you certainly hate to see that, because if Ethan Petrie's playing on, a team that's going to Omaha or a team that's winning a national championship, I think the conversations we have about him years down the line is a lot different than a guy that just played on okay to bad teams.
Yeah, and, even though he didn't necessarily play on, some of the better Gamecock teams, and it kind of seemed like the team or the clubs he was a part of, throughout his tenure with South Carolina kind of declined. But, I mean, his play didn't really decline at all, and I think that's, it's kind of speaks for itself, at least kind of the culture he at least continued to, bring to, even though it's not necessarily the strongest Carolina roster. He's still, his batting average is over 300 throughout his entire career, and whether you have a good night or a bad night, I know at least every night that I was at Founders Park where he got up to play or he got up to the plate, you could instantly kind of feel the mood change. People get excited like, oh, we might see a dinger.
Yeah.
So to kind of have a player like that, even when you're on a bad or okay team, sometimes can really even just boost morale especially when you have a historic season like this.
Yeah, so unfortunately not going to likely see Ethan Petrie anymore in a South Carolina uniform, and the Gamecocks could very likely see their season come to an end tomorrow if they do lose to Florida at 5:30 out there in Hoover at the SEC tournament. On the flip side of things, though, things going extremely well for Gamecock softball as they clinched their first trip to a super regional since 2018. Coach Chastain Woodard yesterday talking after their victory over North Florida about not looking past the super, even though that Oklahoma City is not all that far away.
Yeah, I'm going to do my best to keep him in the moment. There's no doubt, like, once you reach a certain point, like your mind is, hey, like, we're a few away from the biggest stage, the stage we've always dreamed of playing on. So I think we'll definitely talk through that this week. I think at some point it becomes super motivating and inspiring that, like, we're so close. I think that, there comes a point where it almost works in your favor. I think when you're too far away from it, it doesn't work in your favor. But I think once you get inching closer to where you want to go, I think it puts a lot of wins in your sails. So we're going to talk a lot about it. We want to make plans to go to Oklahoma at the end of the Super Regional next weekend. And so I think it'll put wind in our sails. I'm not super worried about them being in the present moment because at this point, they know what we got to do. So we got to win a series next weekend against a really good team that will come from the West. And I think they still have to play tonight. So I'm not so sure we know who that is going to be yet.
If you would have, because again, both Diamond Sports made changes with their head coaches last year for two programs that were good but not great. Two programs that could make regionals but couldn't really go a whole lot further past that. And if you would have asked anybody a year ago when both coaches were hired, which of these teams is going to host a regional and make a super in year number one under the new head coach, I'd be willing to bet 95% of people would have said that was going to be baseball and not softball.
The script writers, I think maybe had a misread or typical from they divvied off from what they initially had written, because at least the preseason poll, they had softball at the bottom of the SEC.
Sure, and baseball too. And again, when you make coaching change, I get it. Like, hey, you don't know what it's going to be like. And they nailed it for baseball. Big miss on softball, though.
So, but what I like about this with softball is now next year, it's going to set that same standard baseball has for softball going forward. This is the norm. We can play at this level. We can go to super regionals. We have what it takes to, make it all the way to Omaha. So I think this is great because it's setting a higher standard for this club for years to come.
Yeah, and again, this season's obviously not over with yet. They win 2 games this weekend against UCLA. They go to Oklahoma City to play for the softball World Series. But you're right. Now, when you go into year number 2, that's the thing that a lot of head coaches run into is they have a lot of success out of the gate and they can't replicate that. So the bar for Ashley Chastain and Woodard in year 2 and going forward is now that much higher because she shows you what she can achieve in year number 1. Again, that's a good problem to have. You would love for that standard for you to be so high that, going to a Super, going to Oklahoma City, playing in the World Series is going to be the standard year in and year out. And again, you just can't help but be impressed by what she's been able to do in her first year here.
Yeah, and it's got to help, when she pitched for South Carolina, she progressively, came more into her own kind of player and developed throughout her throughout her 4-year career with the Gamecocks, but then also kind of had more experience, leaving, her home and coaching with other schools. So I think having that too kind of, you don't get to year 2 and you're kind of looking at the drawing board like, okay, what am I going to necessarily fix? You kind of know what works for you already and what you need to improve to kind of, continue oiling the machine, if you will.
Yeah, and again, a fun weekend out there at Beckham Field for the softball team. Obviously took care of Elon on Friday, had tough games against North Florida on Saturday and Sunday. It took a while for the bats to wake up. After Allison Benning did a really good job, pitching through the order the first time for North Florida. But when they finally woke up, they really came to life, and they were able to play a lot of runs, keep North Florida off the board. Sam Gress did a phenomenal job pitching, getting herself out of multiple jams over the course of the 2 days. And again, they end up yesterday with the run rule victory after 5 innings, and now advance on to this upcoming weekend, taking on a very good and tough UCLA team in a super regional, which should again create a lot of buzz and a lot of fun out there at Beckham Field.
So I never grew up playing baseball at all, and you said that you have before. Is it so fun to win by like a run rule and just completely shut out your opponent?
That is. I don't know. Walk-off wins are pretty fun because of the anticipation and excitement of it, but there's something relaxing about a run rule win, especially when you know it's coming, right? Like, and in high school, I think we had like 5-inning run rules or 4-inning run rules, something along those lines, because we only played 7 innings. But when you know, like, hey, we get 2 more outs and this game's over and we can, pack up and go home or go hang out with our friends or something like that, that's always fun. And again, nobody expected South Carolina to do that yesterday when they scored 6 runs in the bottom of the 5th inning. But it's a good feeling, and obviously it shows that you have established dominance over whatever opponent that you're playing.
And considering they only gave up 2 runs the whole weekend, I mean,
yeah,
they got to be happy going in the super regional.
Listen, the pitching is there's a lot of strengths to this team, but pitching is right there towards the top of the list. And like I said, Sam Gress, who's the ace of staff, routinely got herself, and the defense helped out as well, got herself out of trouble. Bases loaded, 2 on 1 out, those kind of things, and that's what you love to see is teams when faced with adversity, figure it out. And the South Carolina team's done that, in spades. And again, you obviously want them to go out there and win this weekend, but I feel like now that you've hosted a regional, now that you've won the regional, everything past this is gravy. If they win the Super, phenomenal. If they make it to Oklahoma City for the World Series, phenomenal. But if they don't, nobody's going to like, oh, man, I can't believe it. Like, no, you've already passed the bar of expectation. Now everything past this is a plus.
Well, I hope they get UCLA just because historically they're a pretty good softball program overall, and it would be nice to kind of add that on their resume of an already overly successful season so far.
Well, South Carolina's getting back to a place it's not been in a while. So are the New York Knicks, going back to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in a quarter century. We will talk about that when everything that happened with the NBA playoffs this past weekend. Coming up next, it is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Sam Shapiro on your Monday on The Game.
and dribble it out. For the first time in 2.5 decades, the New York Knicks are going to a conference final. And they do it in dominant fashion as they defeat the Celtics in 6 games. It's their largest playoff win ever.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Sam Shapiro. On your Monday here on the game, that was the call on Friday night. Knicks with a thumping of the Boston Celtics, 119-81 to take the Eastern Conference semifinals, Game 6, and take the series 4-2 as they advance, as you just heard, to their first Eastern Conference finals since 2000. I would have been not even 4 years old. I was about 3 when that finals happened back in May of 2000. How about you?
I was probably a little over a year old.
When were you born?
February 99.
Okay, so you were like 16 months at that point in time.
Yeah, barely a year old.
It's been a while, to say the least.
It's been a New York minute, to say the least, Tyler.
Yeah, and this has been such an intriguing series. And you had the Jason Tatum injury in game number 4, but well before that, the Knicks established themselves as the better-looking team in a lot of ways. And Boston, as you saw early on, lives by the 3 and dies by the 3. Threes are hitting, they can dominate. When threes aren't hitting, they don't really have much to fall back on. And that was the case once again on Friday night in Game 6.
Well, both teams kind of died by the 3, especially in the first 2 matchups, especially I think the Knicks and the Celtics, neither of them shot over 35% from beyond the arc. And the Celtics took a lot more threes than New York did, and that was ultimately why New York kind of barely pulled away with that overtime win in Game 1. But the deal break, what really solidified this Knicks team and was the difference maker, well, one, Brunson is healthy this year. Last year, Brunson being injured was really their Achilles heel and ultimately why they lost to Indiana in the conference finals. But, I mean, Mikal Bridges was such a great add for this team, especially defensively. I mean, I remember when they traded from last year, I was like, why would they, make such a big deal out of getting a guy like that? His frame, in terms of just his physicality and his size, he's a long, skinny dude, and that reach was a big reason why he came up with those 2 defensive stops in Game 1 and Game 2. So that plus the Nova connection that he's already got with the Cavs supporting there as well. You make an add in a superstar like Cat over the offseason, and I mean this Knicks team is really. I can't believe I'm saying this. I never thought I'd live to see the day where the Knicks would strongly look like the favorites going into the conference finals, but they really do.
And this is so huge, obviously, for the Knicks organization, Knicks fans, but the league as a whole, right? Because the Knicks are one of those teams that is always propped up, gets a lot of attention because of the brand that they are, but has underachieved for the past, again, quarter century and hasn't won a championship in over 50 years. Like, they're one of those organizations that everybody's waiting to see them break through because there's going to be a lot of attention on them when they do. The majority of interest and eyes on the final 2 rounds of the NBA playoffs is going to be primarily focused on the Knicks because, again, haven't been here in a long time, and they're that program that organization that's got a lot of interest. Celebrities, Ben Stiller and Spike Lee and Tracy Morgan and all these people you see sitting on the baseline of, or sitting on the court side of these games that, help bring the attention to this organization that, again, has underachieved for the better part of the past 25 years.
It's just... It's unbelievable, just the environment that New York becomes when any of the teams really are pretty good. And I feel like, they always kind of say, oh, you shouldn't, root for the other team. If you're a Nets fan, you don't root for the Knicks. If you're a Mets fan, you don't root for the Yankees. I don't know. At least if you leave New York, I'm very that's where I'm from. You can't go against you. You could take me out of the city, but you can't take the city out of me.
Sure.
So I grew up being an anti-Knicks fan just because all of my friends were Knicks fans. So it's been very happy watching a lot of my close friends for the first time this time of year really ever not be. I mean, the last time they didn't get upset or they were excited was Carmelo Anthony and Amari Stoudemire, and literally every single person and their mom had a Jeremy Lin shirt that entire sprig.
I remember Linsanity.
Oh my gosh. So to see New Yorkers getting excited that just their team is in it. I mean, even if they lose, the reactions are priceless. It's just absolutely priceless watching people melt and get upset. But I really want to see Knicks Timberwolves finals. That's for sure.
And it's a very strong possibility we could end up with that. By the way, as I mentioned, it's been 2000 since the last time they were in the Eastern Conference Finals. Do you know what the average for a dozen eggs was back in May of 2000? 93 cents a dozen. Do you know what the average for gas a gallon was back in May of 2000?
Is that like $1.75?
$1.51, actually.
I was pretty close.
So a lot has changed since then. And also, I will say this. The NBA can oftentimes be accused of being rigged. And people will look at what happened the other day with the Dallas Mavericks winning the number one overall pick in the draft lottery as the latest example. If you don't know, Adam Silver grew up a Knicks fan. The fact that in his tenure as the commissioner, this is the first time they reached the Eastern Conference Finals is enough to tell me that the NBA is not rigged.
And that's been so funny, too, between that and watching Stephen A. try to not celebrate while he's covering the Knicks.
He's definitely celebrating.
I'm literally watching on First Take right now. Is this the most historic Knicks run we've ever seen? We know you think it's definitely one of them, but, I mean, there's a lot to be excited, though. I mean, if I was a Knicks fan, I'd be very excited. And just seeing a lot. One of my friends actually works for MSG, and he's been at a lot of the games.
Oh, yeah.
You hear fans talk about the environment, the atmosphere. It's one of one. MSG has definitely been so loud for all those games. You saw it was like $800 just to get in.
I believe it. No, and listen, a NBA Finals at MSG, it seems right.
It seems right this year, and I hope it does come to fruition. I'd be a little disappointed if it was OKC or Minnesota playing Indiana. Just because they got the last laugh last time, and now they've got their full squad, guns blazing. They at least have a superstar in Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson to kind of hopefully carry them forward. But don't knock anything on this Pacers team. They got a lot of shifty guards. Miles Turner is a huge threat in the post. So I mean, they could make a run too. Halliburton really turned it around this season, to be completely honest. I know we've talked about that too.
And we're now in a unique situation where, as I mentioned, it had been over 50 years since the Knicks won. I believe 72 was the last time they won a title. You also have Oklahoma City, who destroyed Denver in Game 7 yesterday, by the way, to make it to the Western Conference Finals. Minnesota and Indiana, all organizations that have never won the NBA Finals. So we're either going to see a brand new champion or a program or organization that's not won one in over half a decade or half a century.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I just saw this post from ESPN. It says none of the four teams had won an NBA championship since at least 1979, but I also think it's equating Oklahoma City as Seattle when they were still the Sonics.
Yeah, because I feel like when you move, that changes, right? So I don't think you recognize it quite the same way. So, yeah, Oklahoma City would be going for their first title.
Which is crazy to think because they were so close that the last time the Knicks were actually pretty good when they had Kevin Durant, Westbrook, James Harden, Kendrick Perkins, who's now analyzing all these guys playing basketball. But he even said, too, which is what I thought was interesting about the Denver Thunder game, he said, because at first they were asking him after Game 6, this Denver team, is coming off winning a championship 2 years prior. How is this young Oklahoma City team going to, rock the barn doors off of Jokic? And he kind of just said, if you don't know what it's like playing in a Thunder home game with that environment in a Game 7, you are sorely mistaken how this is going to pan out, because he honestly favored I thought he was just being biased at first just because, he played for the Thunder, but he was like, I knew what it was like to play in there in a Game 7, and it is insane. So, I mean, hey, he proved to be right yesterday.
Western Finals get rolling tomorrow with Timberwolves and Thunder at 8:30 on ESPN. The Eastern Conference Finals get rolling on a Wednesday with the Knicks and the Pacers as they decide who's going to play for the NBA championship coming up here in a couple of weeks. Speaking of NBA, the WNBA making a lot of headlines this past weekend for its two top stars having some beef with each other. We'll dive into that coming up next. It is The Extra Point. Sorry, and Sam Shapiro on your Monday on the Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. It's Ed and Sam Shapiro. It's time for Who Sprung a Leak, brought to you by our friends over at American Leak Detection. I think we can give this to the collective group of Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, because Saturday both may have sprung a leak as they added to a new chapter to their rivalry that dates back to their days in college with a bit of a scuffle of sorts in the Chicago Sky's 58-93 loss to Caitlin Clark's Indiana Fever after Caitlin Clark grabbed Reese's arm with a pretty hard foul as she was attempting a layup late in the third quarter of that game. Reese falls to the ground, gets back up, looks like she wants to hit her. The tensions are high, emotions get the best of both players. Game continues, no issues there, where there's some fouls obviously handed out, but the chippiness has never gone away with these two, it doesn't seem like.
It's a clear take foul, Tyler. Doesn't everyone know, every good basketball player know that?
That's actually exactly what Caitlin Clark said after the game when asked by Holly Rowe.
Walk me through your perspective on the flagrant foul. What was the point you were trying to make to her?
It's just a good take foul, you know. If either Angel gets wide open 2 points or, we send him to the free throw line. Nothing malicious about it. It's just a good take foul. Every basketball player knows that.
And what did Angel Reese have to say about that when she was asked after the game?
Can you take us through the flagrant foul from your perspective, just what you saw in that play, how you interpreted what happened?
Basketball player, refs got it right. Move on.
Now, the one thing that is flying under the radar a little bit in this back and forth is Aaliyah Boston getting caught in the crosshairs here. So if you watch the foul after Angel Reese falls to the ground, she gets up and it looks like she's going to attempt to smack Caitlin Clark. She's rearing back. Aaliyah Boston right there kind of catches her arm to prevent her from doing that as, they're trying to calm the tensions there. Well, Aaliyah Boston ends up getting called for the flagrant foul, which would end up incurring a fine. Here's a reaction in the post-game presser, learning that she's the one that got called for the tech.
I got the tech?
I didn't know that.
Oh,
first of all,
no.
I know. Let's not make it anything that it's not. It was just a good play on the basketball. I'm not sure what the refs saw to upgrade it, and that's up to their discretion after watching the initial whatever happened during the play and then whatever happened after. We watch a lot of basketball. It's a take foul to put them at the free throw line or rather give up 2 points. I've watched a lot of basketball in my life. That's exactly what it was. I wasn't trying to do anything malicious. That's not the type of player I am. So, yes, it wasn't anything like that. And I went for the ball, and that's clear as day in the replay. You watch it. It shouldn't have been upgraded. But, again, that's up to the ref's discretion. But I appreciate AB having my back, I guess. I don't even know what she did. I didn't see that.
Yeah, well, girl.
Have fun paying that fine.
Can I get half? Can you send me a
I got it.
Oh,
Don't worry.
perfect.
I wonder real hefty.
So Caitlin Clark gets a flagrant 1 foul. Reese and Aaliyah Boston both assessed the technical foul. I do think it's funny that she's like, hey, can you spot me some money here? Help me out with this. I think we all recognize that Caitlin Clark is the highest earning WNBA player right now, so hopefully she slides Aaliyah Boston a few bucks to help out with that fine.
Yeah, that'd be the only proper assist for her to help out her teammate in that case. But if you look at the replay, I don't think she intentionally tried to hit Reese more aggressively or whatever. I think she was definitely trying to foul her, but I don't think she was maliciously trying to hit her or provoke an argument or necessarily start something in that exact play.
And if she's doing this to any other player, it's not making headlines. But because it's Angel Reese on the other side, it's going to garner a lot of attention, which is why we're talking about it. The national media is talking about it, all this kind of stuff, because these two have a history of chippiness going back to their time in college. They played for the national championship. Obviously, LSU got the better of Iowa in that national championship game after Iowa had beaten South Carolina. Angel Reese is doing the ring thing, and these two have always been kind of connected in a way. Now, Caitlin Clark is a far better basketball player than Angel Reese is, but Angel Reese, you cannot deny, is one of the better, more well-known names in the WNBA, like Caitlin Clark. So anytime these two are having any kind of butting of heads, it's going to garner attention.
To me, this almost, and this might be a little bit of a hot take, but to me, they give a lot of the next Bird Magic Johnson kind of rivalry. Started a little bit in college, got really tense when they kind of faced off against each other, and then it kind of mirrored over to the NBA, and then they were kind of the face of the league right when they got in and right when they started clashing. They made, in terms of skill set and the types of players that they, the roles they filled on their team, completely different. But I think in terms of how it started and how it's going, there are some kind of parallels, at least right now, but it'd be interesting to see if they end up becoming best friends later in their career.
But my thing here is this is so good for the WNBA because everybody loves a rivalry. Everybody loves a reason to tune in to see chippiness or what the next layer of this rivalry is going to be. And, the best rivalry in WNBA history is regarded as Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi, right? Former teammates at UConn, obviously played at a high level against each other for a lot of years. But there was never a belief that they hated each other. And they do their show together now. So, it was a rivalry of respect and admiration. Hey, we're both high-level players, going head-to-head or whatever. This is different. This is a rivalry that's built on dislike. And, look, you'll ask Caitlin Clark, you'll ask Angel Reese. They said, no, I respect her, I like her, all this kind of stuff. But the way that they play, you can tell that there is a little bit of disdain between the two. But, again, this is good. This is the kind of things that print money, right? The WNBA already set records last year for its best viewership and all these other categories for the first time in a very long time. They're on the rise. You add a rivalry like this to the mix where anytime the Fever and the Sky get together, it's going to be appointment TV. This is how you make your league. This is how you grow your league even more.
Because you're bringing those fans, too, from the NCAA that followed Iowa for the last 2, 3, 4 seasons and LSU the last 2, 3 years. And now you're going, these players are now playing at the next level. They're playing professionally. So, people are invested in those storylines. And it's great because that kind of just gives it more meat, lights more gas under the fire, and really, it's not one of those storylines that it's like, oh, that was, just in the NCAA, that was cool. Now, they're just playing pro and whatever. No, now it's like that movie is coming to the big stage, and it's got a sequel and another sequel and another sequel.
And these are two players. Again, Caitlin Clark, the better overall player out of the two, but two players that you really can't be indifferent on, right? You either have an opinion one way or the other about both of these women and their playing style, their attitude, antics, whatever it may be. I don't think anybody's really neutral on either one of them. You either love Caitlin Clark or you hate Caitlin Clark. You either love Angel Reese or you hate Angel Reese. And if you love one, you probably hate the other, right? Or have a dislike for the other is maybe kind of a better way to phrase it. But again, this is the kind of stuff that creates compelling television and brings in the casual audience. Because again, there's already a casual audience tuning in because Caitlin Clark being such a high-level player and all this kind of stuff. But you add the fact that now she has this predominant rival that she's going to be seeing a lot of times over the years, maybe even in the postseason as well at some point. That's what takes your league to another level, in my opinion.
And you have, national headlines saying your name and your league and your teams over and over and over again. So in addition to, printing the money, it's just getting more eyes on the sport.
And if I'm the WNBA, I'm milking this for all that it's worth.
Oh, yeah.
I'm taking this and running with it as far as I can, trying to squeeze every single ounce out of it, because you have a short window in the sports calendar to really pull people in. In the WNBA, it's weird because their season starts, not long after college basketball ends while the NBA playoffs are going on. So you only have a small window over the course of the summer months to get people hooked before football starts and people forget the WNBA is on. But this is something that people can sink their teeth into.
Well, I'm hoping that the dog days this summer will feel a less doggish dayish, if that makes sense, just because you got more eyes on the WNBA now. You've got, those players that were really driving exponential more viewership to, the women's game at the college level. Now those players are finally, they're not just rookies in the WNBA anymore. Well, you got Paige Beckers, but,
yeah,
Cardoza, Angel Reese, Hilly Van Lith, just having people like that in the game now is just, maybe there'll be more eyes, watching that kind of basketball throughout the summer, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we'll certainly see. Again, I think it's something that is good for the game, and I think we're all excited to see what the next chapter of Clark versus Reese, ends up being.
Hopefully, I don't know. Do you want them to squash the beef?
No, absolutely not. I want this to continue.
Yeah,
because this is how you print money. This is good for the sport.
I think sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think it would just be. I think I don't know. I agree with you. I think it's definitely good to. I think what they're driving to the league now is helping them get numbers that they should have been seeing a long time ago.
We'll come back and wrap up hour number 2 of the Extra Point. Sam got to go out there and cover Xavier Leggette's youth camp out at Dreher High School this past weekend. We'll dive into that coming up next as we wrap up the Extra Point on your Monday here on the game.
I just want to show them every piece of advice, give them every piece of advice that I have to help them be a better person and be a better player on and off the field. So, man, that's the most thing I think I want to inspire into these kids, push towards these kids.
Welcome back in. Extra point. Sorry, it's Sam Shapiro along with you for a few more minutes before we dive in to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Coming up at 11, that was Xavier Leggett out at Juror High School this past weekend for his youth camp. And Sam, you were on location. That was actually a soundbite from your package that you ran for this over the weekend.
Yeah, it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience getting to interview somebody like Leggett at Bolden Stadium this weekend. Was a lot of fun. I'd never really been to a youth football camp like that before, but it was a great experience, and I was very happy I got to pack that for our Saturday shows.
Yeah, and it seemed like obviously all the kids were excited to be there. Like anytime you can be a kid and go to something hosted by a current NFL player, that's obviously a big deal. But I think it kind of underlines how important community is to Xavier Leggett. And look, some guys, once they go off to the pros, they kind of forget where they come from. And obviously, Leggett, very proud of where he comes from. Mullins, obviously, very thankful for his time here in Columbia. And cool to see him give back to some of those kids out of Juror.
Yeah, he was honestly such a down-to-earth guy. And this is his first camp in Columbia, and he had one in Charlotte previously. And I know he hosts one in his hometown of Mullins every year. So it was nice to see him kind of, show the love closer to, the Gamecocks, where he kind of, pushed himself towards getting into that NFL career. But the best part of this weekend was so we got one-on-one interviews with him, obviously.
Yep.
So we had to pre-write out all of our questions before. I did not pre-write my last question that I had for him, but I know he is a big raccoon enthusiast.
Yes,
which,
he is.
I did not, growing up in New York, I don't personally know anybody that, would choose to dine on some fine raccoon.
No, not surprising.
So naturally, going to this camp, I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to be interviewing the raccoon connoisseur, the expert himself. I was like, I got to get it from the source. I got to know the best way to prepare raccoon.
Sure.
So I didn't write that in the pre-questions that I had planned for the interview because I didn't think they would take me seriously if I wrote it.
Yeah.
So I was like, if I have time at the end, I'll just sneak it in there because I'm sure he'll answer it anyway.
Sure.
So I get through my list of questions and I sneak it in and I'm like, I gotta just ask you, man, like, what's the best way to make raccoon? Apparently sauteing it is a big no-no because you will dry it out.
All right.
But he said the best way, you bake it in the oven.
All right.
He didn't really, give me the play-by-play on necessarily why, but I mean, maybe when you fry it, it gets a little too fatty and it doesn't necessarily pair up when you're, getting ready for workouts before or after. But I would have assumed grilled would have been a pretty decent option.
Now, I have to ask, given that you are not from this area, do you have a tough time understanding what he's saying or are you used to it by now?
Oh, I had cutting those sots was kind of hard. I had no idea what the heck he was saying. I was trying to transcribe actually that one, and that soundbite particularly that made the package, I had to definitely rewind it a couple times to go, okay, wait, so is there a period here? Did he finish the sentence over? But I love his accent. He's such a cool dude, and he's actually a big guy, like 6'3", 230.
Listen, he is a physical specimen.
Yeah. So it was really cool getting to interview him, and he's very much how he is on TV.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oh, sure. No, he's a genuine guy.
So it's definitely not like a persona or I'm a South Carolinian in the NFL. Like, that's just literally who he is. Xavier's like Xavier, and I appreciate his time and his patience and finding my question funny.
Now, did you get to ride Dollar Bill like the kids did, celebrating with him? Or he does the horse riding?
That I didn't get to do. He didn't bring any horses, unfortunately, to the camp, but he did throw a couple interceptions. I know he played quarterback in high school, so I was surprised some of those young ones were picking him off in those scrimmages.
He's not as polished as a quarterback these past couple of years. Been focused on being a receiver, so we'll forgive him for that.
Maybe.
That'll do it for the Extra Point. Coming to our next Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, as your Monday rolls along here on the game. 11 o'clock on your Monday morning. Welcome in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark along with you. Good to see you guys again. Hopefully it was a good week without me and everything went smoothly. Nothing's on fire, so you guys kept the place intact, which is good.
I don't think we were off air at any point.
Good.
So
solid.
Yeah.
I didn't get a bad report from the substitute teacher, so that's always good, right?
Well, there wasn't a substitute teacher, so.
Oh, so it was just anarchy the entire week.
Well, the 11 to 12, we were just doing whatever we wanted.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you kept it within the lines.
Yeah, it was a free period, so we did okay. Now I can't speak to your shows from the in the 9 and 10, Tyler. I'm not sure what Terry did with them.
Yeah, Terry was hosting those, and the less I know about that, the better. I feel like
that's probably good.
Smart man.
How was your time off?
It was fun. Good time. Went to the Post Malone Jelly Roll concert last Sunday in Atlanta. Good time there, and then hung out in Nashville for a couple days.
Who did you enjoy more, Post Malone or Jelly Roll?
Oh man, I think I may have enjoyed Jelly Roll just a little bit more. I mean, Post Malone was the headliner, but man, Jelly puts on a good show.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah,
I haven't. He was in Columbia.
Yeah,
recently. I feel like
I went to the one in Columbia. It was really good. I feel like I did see on social media this morning that they had a stop in Detroit, and Eminem came on stage to do "Lose Yourself." I feel like that would have been that'd be a highlight moment right there.
I will say we got surprised at the end of the Post Malone set. He played Congratulations, and Quavo came out, which again, they were in Atlanta, which makes a lot of sense, but it wasn't announced, so that was pretty neat.
That is cool. And Nashville, first, your review, that was your first time in Nashville?
First ever time in Nashville. A lot of fun. Very expensive week out there in Nashville. I did go slightly over budget, but we had a good time. Hit, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 different bars. There's a million of them. You can't get to all of them in one swing, but it was fun.
Yeah, you're not going to survive that if you
not at all.
If you go to all of them. But yeah, glad you had fun, man. And I'm glad you went over budget too, man. Nobody wants to go on vacation and go under budget.
Well, and look, I didn't have a hard line of I can't spend more than this, but I do like to keep track of those kind of things over the course of the week. I'm like, went a little bit over. That parking was expensive. I'll say that. For anybody that goes and parks in downtown Nashville, that's gonna eat up quite a bit of your funding for the week.
Yeah, I get it. Did you watch any Gamecock sports while you were gone, or you just unplugged?
No, I keep my eye on things. Fun, wild baseball game on Thursday night. That was obviously the only highlight of the weekend, unfortunately. And we can just go ahead and start off with this. We now have history being made, the worst Gamecock baseball season in SEC play at 6-24.
Yeah, great way to start the week there, Tyler. I thought we were going somewhere positive, but I guess you're just going to rip the Band-Aid off for everyone and
may as well
go straight to this. And, we saw this. This has been coming down the tracks, I think. Like if you started to look ahead a little bit a few weeks ago, you knew unless there was a huge turnaround, this was probably what was going to happen. And, frankly, sometimes stats don't match what you see with your eyes, or maybe 15 guys got injured and you say, man, they just didn't have a chance. In this case, that was not the case. Unfortunately for Carolina, that stat, the fact that it's the worst record they've ever had, matches what we saw with our own eyes. This looked like a team that performed to that bad record, I think. And, unfortunately, you're at a point where a lot of times, even when Carolina's had down years, you would go into this SEC tournament week and say, well, they need, if they win a game, they're on the bubble. Or some years you'd be going, hey, they just need to make a run and they'll get in. The fact that you're sitting here as the 15th best team in the SEC, the fact that you have to win the entire thing to make the postseason, which is not going to happen. And the fact that you're facing Florida, a team that just, punched you in the face 3 times in your hometown, and is probably one of the hottest teams in the country right now to start the tournament. Just not a lot of just light at the end of the tunnel right now, I feel like.
No, there's not. And, you get, anytime you're the 15 seed in the tournament, you're typically not going to be staring at a path, because like you said, Wes, the path is you do have to win the entire thing, which at this point seems not to be negative, but just from the strength of the conference and how the Gamecocks have been playing, you look at it and go, that's not only a heavy lift, it honestly looks downright impossible at this point. Maybe you look at it and you go, okay, maybe is there a good matchup here, even though we're the 15 seed, but instead you get Florida, who's already beaten you and has been hot lately, and Florida had some struggles early in the season, but they have been hot lately. And I talked to some people down in Florida at the beginning of the season and heard, hey, they're very young. They're unproven, but they're very, very talented. And you've seen that over the course of the year kind of become evident, that they have a really, really good team. So it's going to be tough. And honestly, it just kind of puts they will go out and play in the SEC tournament, and we'll see, how long that lasts. But it does kind of, I think the end of the regular season has people looking even more to what's next, right? And this has been a conversation in Columbia. It's been a conversation among the fan base for quite a while now, right? Like, what is next? What does this season mean in the grand scheme of things? People have wondered about Paul Maneri's future, et cetera. And guys, I don't know, but my mind has almost shifted while keeping an eye on things like the current state of affairs. You really start looking ahead, and that process started a while back. So what does this offseason look like? What, types of changes will be made? And I think one thing to get out in front of is, for anybody still wondering, it does very much seem like, unless something drastically changes, there's going to be a year or two of the Paul Maneri era. That's something we had discussed and reported on Gamecock Central a while back. Wes, I know you saw Pete Nakos of On3 came out with a story, kind of outlining some college baseball jobs, hot seat talk kind of around the country, right? And he doubled down on that as well, that's the expectation. So I think that's where a lot of people's minds are right now, is just what does this offseason look like and how can you get this thing turned around?
Yeah, and look, there's always a possibility you make some staff changes underneath Paul Maneri, whether it be Monty Lee or Terry Rooney or something along those lines to kind of fix either the pitching or the hitting problems that this team has had. And, for as bad as this season's been, there is something to be said if you were to have ended the year in a little bit of an upswing, maybe win a couple series or two, or look kind of like a different type of team in these last couple series, but you'd say arguably some of their worst baseball has come over these past couple weeks. And yeah, you've had injuries, guys like Petrie and Lee Correa obviously being out for a while, which certainly don't help it, but you're not going into this offseason outside of, again, going on a crazy run in Hoover this week saying, wow, they really kind of finished on a little bit of an upswing like we've seen teams in years past maybe have done, like Missouri, who, again, didn't have a conference win for the first 2.5 months of the season. They ended the year at least on a bit of a positive upswing that they can use kind of carrying momentum in the offseason if they're going to turn into something better next year.
Yeah, in athletics, you want some hope, right? Like you want something to build from and build off of. And, right now, like you did win the game Thursday, but then you just weren't able to capitalize and take the series with 2 opportunities at it the next 2 nights. And so you're looking for, I think the big thing for the fans, and, here's the thing. I'm not so sure that everybody was in sync from the very beginning. I mean, you bring in a national title winning coach, the all-time most active winning coach in terms of his career in college ball right now, and then first SEC weekend, it's not packed. It's not a sellout. And so, and this is not a blame the fans post on Gamecock Central. This is a fact. I don't know if everybody was completely re-energized in the first place. And because when people are involved and they're all about it, that place is packed. Founders is packed. And you can go back a couple of years, ironically, against LSU. I thought this sort of height of the Kingston era was that team versus LSU. Paul Skeens on the mound, Ethan Petrie going yard, and the place is going absolutely insane. And so typically when you hire a new coach, there's a renewed excitement. And I thought maybe when the press conference happened and when this announcement was made, that was the case. But then I didn't really see it play out that way in terms of the atmospheres at the park. And then you see the team and you see the season just get worse and worse and worse and worse. So there's got to be a certain synergy between the fans and the staff and a belief. And I don't know what has been missing, but something has just been off. Even before you had the worst SEC record in South Carolina baseball history. So I think the real question is, all right, what's the plan moving forward? And yes, if Mainieri is back and if the administration wants him back and he wants to be back, what's the plan to get this thing fixed? And it can't just be, well, we're just going to hit the portal. That's what every team that is struggling says, we'll hit the portal. That can't be the plan. It can't just be, let's hit the portal. That's what everybody's doing.
No, I mean, some good points in there, man, because it's like when you look at the fan interest, and I'm with you, this is not like it could have been a sellout every game this year, and maybe the results are the exact same. Like, I completely understand why, especially at the end of the year, there was more, I guess, apathy, you could say, right? You understand that. It's been a very tough season. But even at the beginning, before SEC play, the opening weekend, you got a ranked team coming in to Founders Park. It's like, what's going on here, right? And it's probably a combination of factors. I think the Paul Mainieri hire, among the fan base at least, some people loved it, some people didn't. I think there was maybe a hangover effect, from parts of the Kingston era and the disappointments there. Maybe it's the fact that your team, South Carolina, was not getting a ton, and deservedly so. There was not a ton of preseason buzz. Maybe it was just all of those factors. But now you look at how do you fix it? You're right. It can't just be the portal, right? It has to be retention of some key pieces, which I still think you do have some pieces that can be integral to this program on the roster this year. Can you retain those? Yes. I mean, you are frankly going to have to hit the portal, but that can't be the only solution. And then just inside the program, what we don't know the answer to that yet. But what types of tweaks there do you make, whether it's philosophical, big picture? What else do you change aside from the personnel where, yes, you do need to go get more power pitchers. You need to go get more power hitters, et cetera. You got to stay healthy. But what else about the program changes? And I think that's, the key question going into the offseason is what does the entire picture of fixing this program look like?
Gamecock baseball now moves on to the SEC tournament, taking on Florida tomorrow afternoon at 5:30, which you can listen to right here on 107.5 The Game. And again, they got to win the thing out if they want to keep playing into the NCAA tournament, as that is their final hope. Speaking of the NCAA tournament, the positive of the weekend is what Gamecock softball was able to do out at Beckham Field, hosting their first regional since 2018. We'll dive into that coming up next. Let's hear from Coach Chastain Woodard as well as the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs rolls on here on The Game.
Our friends over at Game Day Men's Health can help you as a man reclaim your vitality by optimizing hormone levels. They specialize in TRT, or testosterone replacement therapy, which will help boost your energy and strength. And they're a lot different than other clinics that do similar things. They have in-house labs that can deliver your results in just 15 minutes. They're conveniently located in Northeast Columbia near I-77 and Two Notch Road. Comfortable man cave style clinics with TVs and refreshments while you wait. Also great, they don't use any long-term contracts. Flexible plans tailored to your needs. TRT tests available to check your levels with absolutely no obligation, and then ongoing monitoring, committed to your success with expert guidance. You can get started by going to GameDayMen'sHealth.com/North-Columbia. Again, located just off I-77, or give them a call, 803-265-3161.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West, Chris with you on your Monday. This past weekend, Gamecock softball playing host to the Columbia Regionals, a top 8 national seed. We're able to walk out of it with 3 victories, 1 against Elon on Friday, then 2 against North Florida on Saturday and Sunday to move on to a super regional for the first time since 2018. Coach Chastain Woodard talking after yesterday's game on her thoughts on advancing to that super.
Yeah, I don't know if I have words, to be honest. I'm just really proud of everyone that is involved with the program. It takes a village to do something like this, and it's a special group, and I'm really excited that we're going to be right back here a week from now. And, it's just a testament to really the belief that these guys had in everything we talked about from day one. And it's really hard to do. We play in the best conference in the country, and to put ourselves in a position to host and then to come through as the regional champs and then have an opportunity to go to Supers next weekend. It's just really special. It's hard to do, and I'm really proud of the staff, proud of the players, and then really everyone that's been involved every step of the way since last summer. So I don't really have words. It'll probably take me through the summer to process it all. But right now we're just really focused on what's next, and being able to prepare, and just the opportunity to be together again another week is really special.
And it was certainly not easy for South Carolina. That was a North Florida team that held them in check for the first half of both those games, Saturday and Sunday. And then South Carolina was obviously able to help the Bats come alive in the latter half of both those games with the run rule victory yesterday. Phenomenal pitching all weekend long. Sam Gress continued to get herself after jam after jam. And again, a great weekend overall at her Beckham Field as now they await UCLA coming in as the number 9 seed for the Super Regional next weekend.
Yeah, and Jory Hurd, dominant. I think... 1 hit allowed in 8 1/3 or 8 2/3 innings. I can't find total regional stats for some reason on the thing, so I was trying to do some quick math myself. But they really found something there, I think, in terms of Gress as the starter, kind of your workhorse, kind of, she's going to be the emotional team leader, and then just Jory Hurd comes in and absolutely slams the door for South Carolina. And she was, I would say, just dominant this weekend. And this weekend really was about South Carolina doing what I feel like, for the most part, when they're going right, that they've done all year long. And that's, you're going to get a good all-around effort from South Carolina. They're going to play great defense, they're going to pitch, and then they're going to get timely hitting. And that was the case this weekend again. I was just overall, I went to 2 of the games. I was overall just amazed with the quality of a regional where South Carolina didn't even end up playing what was supposed to be the 2 seed in Virginia. But, I mean, both North Florida and Elon, in my opinion, were game. Like, these are good teams.
North Florida had the crazy comeback late on Saturday in the second game they had to play that day.
Yeah, and a lot of what happened with the Bats for South Carolina against North Florida was just Allison Benning, who's their superstar 2-way player, is a star at the plate and in the circle, and she was phenomenal. You kind of felt like, at least I did, I thought South Carolina was hitting the ball hard at times. It just happened to be right at people. You sort of felt like they were going to break through eventually, and of course they did so. But just a all-around just team win. You had, of course, big efforts from like Ari Rhodey, but then you had some girls further down the lineup who I thought just had really, really big ABs as well. So just an all-around, I think, example of what that staff has built this team into being in year 1.
Well, and guys, we can't look past that, especially with the draw that South Carolina had. Yes, they were a top 8 seed. They're hosting a regional. So you look at it on paper and go, okay, they should advance through this thing. But Texas A&M, just ask them, it's not cut and dry. It's not easy to go win and advance to a super. And A&M comes in. They were the number 1 overall seed. They're out. They're done. Liberty has a thrilling win over them, 6-5. To win that regional. So, we had talked to Coach Chastain Woodard on Friday when we were out at Pro Swing, and it's kind of hard when you're previewing not just a regional, but before you're getting into tournament play, there's a temptation to go big picture. And I even asked some questions and tried to say, hey, I know you have to take care of business, but, what's the difference between getting an 8 seed and getting a 9 seed? And you kind of have to stay in the moment and remember, yes, it's great to have an opportunity to host a super, but you got to get there first, right? And so they were able to do it. In addition to what you said, Wes, I think another key stat there, last game against North Florida, 8-0, I think all 8 of those runs came with 2 outs. So you had some clutch hitting in there. You got some big pitching performances, defense as usual. So really good to advance with, I would say minimal problems, in the regional and get out of that thing clean. And now you've got an opportunity to host UCLA. And now, guys, that difference between sneaking in as the 8 seed, earning the 8 seed, right? But I say sneaking in because you were on the line. UCLA was the team that you were probably battling for that seed. That turned out to be the case. And now instead of flying across the country to play a team in UCLA that's been hot, that won their regional in 3 games and won them all via run rule, now they've got to come to Columbia. And to me, that makes a pretty big difference.
Looking at some stats from the weekend, you mentioned Julia Hurd. She did go 8 2/3 innings pitched with just 1 hit allowed. Sam Gress, 8 2/3 herself, 9 hits, 0 runs, and 5 strikeouts. Ari Rhodey, 3 of 8 with 3 RBIs, and yet another home run that came in game number 1 against D-Line. And then Brooke Blankenship, 4 of 8 on the weekend with 3 RBIs herself. So, again, some of those usual names we talk about stepping up for the Gamecocks, doing it once again this weekend.
Yeah, and I think you add in Abigail Knight, who had a couple of big knocks. I think she had 3 hits.
3 RBIs yesterday.
Emma Sellers, who, is kind of that utility player, DP role. And I think just an all-around team effort. Great defense also from Brooke Blankenship at shortstop. Carly Shelton had a diving stop and throw that was probably one of the better plays you're ever going to see. Emily Vincent in left field had a sliding grab in one of the games, and just overall great effort from everybody. But, Brooke Blankenship, I think it's interesting, as much as this team has been about the Charlotte girls transferring in, it equally to me is about the players who stuck around and, have been in this program for a while. That combination of the Charlotte girls, of course, Lidlio coming in from Oklahoma, and kind of that combination even in the circle. You have Sam Grass, who comes in from Charlotte, Jory Hurd, who was already here. And so kind of combining the two, them coming together as a team, but then Brooke Blankenship, someone who's always been a great defender for South Carolina at shortstop, and she had a great weekend there too. But I remember Ashley Chastain Woodard telling us, hey, we have tried to empower Blankenship into realizing she can be a two-way player, like she can be an impact bat. And she had great at-bats all weekend, and she actually had, but before, the game got busted open, she had one of the huge hits this weekend as well. And so great at-bats all weekend. She had 500, 3 RBIs, and just a great all-around weekend for her.
Guys, and if you look at the regional results across the country too, we talked a lot about how 7 of the 8 national seeds 1 through 8 were SEC programs. One, of course, was South Carolina. 9 SEC teams remain in the field out of the top 16. Georgia's in there. Florida, Georgia are matched up in a super. Then you got Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Ole Miss, and the Gamecocks. So still a strong SEC flavor throughout the rest of this tournament as well.
They'll take on UCLA in the Super Regional coming up this weekend over at Beckham Field. First game coming up Friday afternoon at 1 o'clock, which you can watch on ESPN2. And, of course, they win 2 out of 3. They will go to Oklahoma City for the first time in nearly 30 years. And we'll have plenty more to talk about as the week rolls along with Gamecock softball. FanDuel has released the early lines for some Week 0 and Week 1 matchups, including South Carolina's game against Virginia Tech. We'll dive into that and how big of a favorites the Gamecocks might be heading into that matchup. Up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
All right, folks, want to send a big shout-out to our friends over at Integrated Media. Of course, we were out at Pro Swing on Friday, as we've been several times. And if you look around Pro Swing, by the way, brought to you by the same great folks, but you'll see these big screen TVs everywhere. And maybe you're thinking, I want to add that to my home. I want to upgrade the man cave. I want to upgrade my streaming. If any of that is something that you feel like you need, give them a call today, 803-948-8327, or head on over to integratedmediainc.com where you can get more information about all of their great services. For me, they've been in my house. For us, it was about, of course, working from home, doing all the streaming we do on Gamecock Central, making sure that I had a great, solid connection. So they ran Ethernet all around the home, whole home Wi-Fi with the different mesh routers connecting to each other. And so if that's something you need, hit them up today. Again, integratedmediainc.com.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West, and Chris. Appreciate everybody checking us out on the Game TV. Sponsored by our friends over at Shepherd's Glass and powered by Integrated Media. You can also listen to us on the 107.5 The Game app from the iTunes Store or the Google Play Store. Take us with you wherever you go. Any guesses on how many days until August 31st in South Carolina kicks off the season?
I mean, is it about 107?
You guess 107. Chris, what's your guess?
I think I saw, is 15 weeks accurate?
Saturday would have been 15 weeks from the beginning of the first week, yes.
Yeah. Wes, what was your guess?
He said 107.
107. $1, Bob. 105.
Oh, okay. Chris is going to win 104.
Ah.
104.
You like my Price is Right strategy?
Yeah, hey, it works.
Lame.
You don't win anything for it, but I appreciate the strategy there. 104 days until South Carolina squares off with Virginia Tech in Mercedes-Benz Stadium on August 31st. Did learn last week that was going to be a 3 o'clock kickoff leading into Miami Notre Dame coming up that night. FanDuel has released its early lines for Week 0 and Week 1 games, as well as the Michigan-Ohio State game at the end of the season as well. We'll kind of focus on Week 1 for right now. South Carolina already a very heavy favorite over Virginia Tech, being favored by 9.5 points this early out. Now, obviously, we still got a long summer of discussion, and perceptions of teams can certainly change, but South Carolina goes in right now as a pretty heavy favorite over the Hokies, now 104 days out.
Yeah, I don't think it's too shocking. You look at the expectations for this South Carolina team going into this year. Obviously, all the stuff we talk about on a big picture level. Then you look at Virginia Tech, a team that I think lost a lot of guys, and a team that, is kind of trying to find, I think, who they are as a program right now under the staff. And neutral site, obviously, so there's no swing one way or the other for it being a home team or a home game for either team. And I honestly wondered if it would get into the double digits. I feel like, was there not a way too early future line on this game months ago? I feel like that was almost 2 touchdowns. So that might have been a dream I had, but Chris, what'd you think? 9.5?
Yeah, fair, right? I mean, if you had asked me, hey, you're responsible for setting the lines, which thank the Lord I'm not, what would you put on it? I would have guessed, hey, if it's a little lower than expected, like 7.5, or 10-ish, So I'm with you. I thought it could get into the double digits, but 9.5 seems fair, based on what we know right now. We're not to the point either where we're going to be picking this game because we're, both programs just finished spring ball. But based on what we know right now, if you're kind of looking through the schedule and you're starting with that first game, hey, is South Carolina favored or not? I'm probably favoring the Gamecocks. I'm definitely favoring the Gamecocks. And then I'd probably say, hey, I think they win by 7 or 10. Again, it's very early. We'll see how our thoughts may evolve on that, but seems totally fair to me. I wouldn't have expected, hey, they're going to be getting to the double digits and the line's 20 on this thing. I wouldn't have expected that, but this is probably along the lines of what I would have thought.
And like Wes alluded to a moment ago, this is a Virginia Tech team still trying to figure themselves out under Brent Pry. Very much a make or break season for him. Jack and I talked to a guy that covers them the week before I left, and he said this is kind of the hot seat year for Brent Pry if they can't get things turned around, coming off of a 6-7 campaign a year ago. And they struggled a lot offensively last year. Kyron Daniels coming back for another year as starter. They bring in Philip Montgomery as the offensive coordinator, hoping to turn things around, but they've had to really reinvent themselves on offense in a lot of ways. Lose their leading rusher, lose most of their receivers from a year ago. Done a lot of work in the transfer portal, but like so many teams, you just kind of have to shrug your shoulders and wait and see what's actually going to show up on the field to know how good this team's going to be or not.
Yeah, and even with all that said, as we saw with South Carolina last year, a game one maybe doesn't necessarily tell you anything at all. And, I look at game ones in a lot of ways as survive and advance. It's kind of like, when you get into a tournament and you're maybe game one, you're playing a scrappy opponent who maybe gets hot or something like that, and you just say, hey, find a way to win. So would you take a 10-point or a 9-point win if you were South Carolina in this one? Of course, but early season games, Beamer talks about it all the time. There is no preseason. There is no chance to kind of warm up and just face an opponent to get you ready. You're going out there, and the scout is going to be a little bit different for game one because you do have all these new players. You do have now Philip Montgomery is someone who, he's been in the game for a long time. So it's not that it's going to be a completely new offensive scheme. Every coach kind of has a resume that travels with them in terms of their scheme. But, what's his approach going to be to this personnel? And so, yeah, I got to imagine, Chris, I know coaches are confident and they always believe in themselves, but the night before a game one, when you're laying your head down at night and you've installed all you're going to install, that's got to be one of the most nerve-wracking things in sports, not knowing what that opponent's going to throw at you the next day.
Yeah, no doubt. And Philip Montgomery is an interesting background. Came over from Auburn working with Hugh Freeze, but he's also been at Baylor, right, where they're running, 100 plays in a game, going at warp speed. And from what I've seen from Philip Montgomery talking about that, the new Virginia Tech OC is who we're referencing here. They're not necessarily going to play all the time at breakneck pace, but they will implement it at times. And to your point, Wes, how much, right? Like what pieces will he bring from Baylor? What pieces, what new will he have in? And he'll be wondering the same thing about Clayton White, who made some structural changes to South Carolina's defense last year. Yeah, they put a lot on tape last season. They've got some personnel changes too. And so what changes on South Carolina? South Carolina's in. It is a good first test for South Carolina. Obviously, you want to come out with the win, but I do think this game will tell you some about what you need to know of your team going forward to the rest of the season. You're not opening up with, obviously Carolina had a lot of trouble with Old Dominion last year. But remember, we were told, hey, Old Dominion plays a weird type of defense. It's going to be tough. And it ended up being a lot tougher than maybe anybody anticipated. Similarly, you're going into this with some questions, but you are playing a Power 4 team. So from a talent standpoint, you would think you probably got more talent than Virginia Tech. But it's going to be more comparable than some of the other opponents that you could theoretically open a season with. Tempo is something that South Carolina's seen in other teams that they've played. Tennessee, for instance, in the first couple years of the Shane Beamer era. So there's a lot to consider here, and I think both sides will be kind of feeling their way through it in this first week. But a good matchup that I think everybody's anticipating, and I think we'll learn a lot about both of them.
Again, that coming up August 31st on Sunday, 3 o'clock kick, leading into Miami Notre Dame, capping off the day that night at 7:30. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the hour. What's the worst traffic jam you've ever sat in your entire life? Because I think I just had the worst of my entire life driving back from Nashville the other day. I'll tell you about it coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West, and Chris along with you for a few more minutes here on your Monday on the Game. Gamecock Baseball getting back in action tomorrow in the SEC Tournament. Another chance for you to win the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway, $625 in the pot. Go online to 1075thegame.com and register if you've not already for the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. I asked the question before the commercial break. What's the most miserable traffic jam you've ever been stuck in your entire life? Anything come to mind?
Nothing specific, but it had to be Atlanta.
Okay, Chris?
Yes. So Atlanta was actually not my worst one, but every time I drive to Atlanta, like I went on a mini rant to my wife last time, and I was like, we are literally just going to drive to the Columbia Airport and fly to Atlanta next time instead of driving to, in theory, it's 3.5 hours in theory, but then you try to get there. I've been in Washington, D.C. traffic. That's tough, particularly if they decide to add construction to the mix. I don't even remember where this was, to be completely honest with you. It was several years ago, but I got in one where if you see the brake lights and you see the traffic and you go, okay, there's going to be a jam. How bad is this going to be? And then when you look ahead for what seems like miles and you see people getting out of their cars.
Oh, no.
That's not a good sign. There was, unfortunately, some type of massive wreck or something. And yeah, people are literally getting out, and so we're there. You can't go anywhere. It was a couple hours of not traffic jam, but just literally stationary, just sitting there.
Look, I've lived in Georgia most of my life, and I'm very familiar with Atlanta traffic. It got me the worst it's ever gotten me driving back from Nashville on Friday. Now, you got to keep in mind, Nashville is an hour behind because they're on Central Time. So our checkout, the hotel was at 11, which really meant it was 12 o'clock Eastern Time as we were driving back to my parents' house in Covington. And I get, if you're familiar with the Atlanta area where Truist Park is in Marietta, roughly, 20 or so miles north of the city. Basically from that point to where my parents live is about 50 miles. Do you want to guess how long it took me to go those final 50 miles of my trip on Friday?
4 hours.
About 3.5. I'm not kidding. Like there was no escape. And like you said, you can try and get off on a side street. You can try and get on a different part of the perimeter. It's everywhere. There's no escaping. And again, I've been in plenty of bad traffic. I worked in Atlanta for a period of time during an internship over a summer. I drove, and all of it, I've never seen it like this before. That was the worst traffic I'd experienced in my entire life. It was mind-numbing.
What happened?
I don't know. That's the thing. It was just Friday traffic. And again, I should have timed it a little bit better, but we rolled into the Atlanta area around 2:45, 3-ish. So that's typically ahead of where it really gets bad around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. But it started so early that by the time we actually got into the city, it was 5 o'clock, and then I was doomed from there.
You don't know what my pet peeve is when something like that happens and you're like, there's got to be a big wreck up here. There's got to be something going on up here. And then you reach like just a random, it seems a random spot on the planet.
Yeah.
And then the traffic just disperses and just opens up again.
Yep.
And you're like,
make it worth it.
What was happening?
Make it worth it. I agree with you. Like, yeah, there better be, obviously you don't want anybody to be hurt, but there better be 4 cars on the side of the interstate.
At least want to know
like that.
what happened.
There's no more helpless feeling either. And I know some side streets in Atlanta, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try and get off here and maybe make this a little bit better. And there's no worse feeling than trying to reroute yourself and having an exit that's like half a mile ahead that's 7 lanes over that you're not going to be able to get over to in time just because, like, the traffic is that thick.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was not fun.
That drive back from Nashville can be tough. I've learned my lesson, Wes. Another drive to Nashville again. We're back.
It's a tough subject there, Chris.
What happened?
Wes is still mad. Well, when we had the On 3 conference, we've talked about this a little bit before.
I was like, dude, we can fly.
Okay.
It's an option.
Chris like, planes. Nah, let's just drive. It's like, dude, we could fly.
Yeah.
More flexible, but there was traffic on the way back. We all wanted to be home. We couldn't get home because Chris made us drive.
We could fly. All I'm saying.
Next time you'll fly, right?
We'll fly.
I
next
sure
time.
hope so.
We might fly to.
I'm
Atlanta.
flying,
Yeah.
whether Chris is or not.
I did successfully drive down a mountain for the first time on the way there. I don't know why our GPS took us up a mountain, but I drove down one, and it's, just you're white knuckling the steering wheel and got the hand on the foot on the brake the entire time coming down. So I successfully did that at least.
Have you unsuccessfully driven down a mountain before,
No,
or you
I
just
not.
have never
Well, I've
attempted
just
it?
never had to drive down a mountain before. So
Okay.
the first time, I'm 1 for 1. I'm batting 1,000 so far.
That's
Maybe
good.
you should stop while you're ahead. That's talking about pet peeve. Sometimes you're going down a mountain and they will put a guardrail, and you're like, "That's good. There's a guardrail there. There's like a 15-foot drop." You'll go around some curves. You're like, "That's a 15-mile drop." It looks like it's 15,000 feet, no guardrail. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess they only had so much metal to go around, right?
Apparently, yes. You have to ration it.
That'll do it for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Coming up next, halftime show. Myself, Terry Ford, on your Monday here on the game.
I don't know about y'all, but I am starving. Time to hit up Firehouse Subs for an awesome lunch. FirehouseSubs.com, Firehouse Subs app, the two easiest ways to order. Hit the Rapid Rescue to go, or just hit the Order Now button. You can try the new Zesty Garlic Hook and Ladder or the new Spicy Dill Hook and Ladder. I got an alert on my phone, though. These will not be around forever. So if you haven't tried it yet, or better yet, if you've taken our advice and you've tried it, loved it, and want to continue to eat it, go ahead and order now before they're gone. I don't want to say gone forever, but at least gone for the foreseeable future. Again, that Zesty Garlic, that's more if you like a little bit of hot sauce, but want the more mild, just like the flavor. The Spicy Dill is if you like it super, super hot. Of course, Hot Sauce Bar itself is back, too, so you can add hot sauce of many, many, many options to any sub you want. Hit them up right now. Hit them up today. FirehouseSubs.com.